Sofia Richards was no stranger to hard work. As a woman of modest means, she had learned early in life that success didn't come easy. But today, she was determined to make a purchase. A new car was long overdue, and with the savings she had worked tirelessly to accumulate, she was ready to finally treat herself to something special. What she didn't expect, however, was to be treated like she didn't belong. The upscale dealership, nestled in the heart of the city's most affluent district, had an air of exclusivity. The luxury cars on display gleamed under the bright lights, their polished surfaces reflecting the high-end showroom's grandeur. Sofia stepped into the dealership, her simple outfit of a modest dress and cardigan a stark contrast to the expensive suits and designer dresses of the customers milling about. She felt the eyes of the staff on her as she approached the front desk, and she couldn't help but sense the undercurrent of judgment. The receptionist, a young woman with a sharp gaze, barely looked up as Sofia approached. "How may I help you?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I'm interested in purchasing a car," Sofia replied with a friendly smile. "I've been saving up for quite a while, and I'd like to see what you have available." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, her gaze scanning Sofia from head to toe. "I'm not sure we have anything in your price range, but I can show you what's available," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Sofia's smile faltered slightly, but she remained composed. She had dealt with people like this before, those who assumed that because she didn't look the part, she didn't belong. But she had worked hard for her savings, and she was going to make this purchase, regardless of how they treated her. The receptionist led her to a sleek black sedan, far more expensive than anything Sofia had ever imagined owning, but the car was beautiful. Sofia could see herself driving it, feeling the smooth leather seats, the power under her hands. As she ran her fingers along the glossy surface, she could hear a voice behind her. "That one's not really for someone like you," a man's voice said, dripping with disdain. Sofia turned to see a sales associate standing behind her, his arms crossed over his chest. He was well-dressed, his expensive suit a sharp contrast to her modest dress. He gave her a once-over, his eyes lingering on her unpolished shoes. "I'm sorry," Sofia asked, taken aback by the comment. "You heard me," the salesman replied, a smirk forming on his lips. "This car is for people who can afford it, not for someone like you." Sofia felt a rush of anger, but she quickly calmed herself. She had dealt with prejudice before, and she wasn't about to let this man ruin her day. "I can afford it," she said, her voice steady. "I've been saving for this moment for years, and I've done my research. If you could kindly show me the paperwork, I'd appreciate it." The salesman laughed, a dismissive sound that echoed through the showroom. "No offense, but I don't think we'll be selling to you today," he said, the words sharp and cutting. "I think it's best if you leave." Sofia's heart raced, the humiliation stinging more than she had expected. She had never been treated like this in her life, and the injustice of it weighed heavily on her. She opened her mouth to respond, but the receptionist was already ushering her toward the door. "Please, ma'am, we'd like you to leave now," the receptionist said, her voice cold. "We don't have time for time wasters." Sofia stood frozen for a moment, the shame settling in her chest. She had walked in with hope and determination, and now she was being escorted out like she was nothing more than a nuisance. She didn't look back as she left the dealership, but the weight of their rude, racist treatment stayed with her. The walk to her car felt longer than usual. The city streets, once bustling with energy, now seemed distant and indifferent. Sofia sat in her car, staring out at the dealership as the sting of the rejection slowly turned to resolve. She wasn't going to let this define her. She was better than this, and she would find a way to prove it. As she drove home, Sofia made a promise to herself. She would not let the judgment of others stop her from achieving what she deserved. She had earned the right to be treated with respect, and she would not let their cruelty break her spirit. But what Sofia didn't know was that she wasn't done with the dealership just yet. Fate had other plans for her, and the next day would bring a shocking twist that would change everything. The following morning, Sofia woke up earlier than usual. The events of the day before weighed heavily on her mind, and despite her resolve to not let it affect her, it still stung. She had spent the entire evening tossing and turning in bed, replaying the incident over and over in her head. How could they treat her like that? Was it because of her appearance, her clothes, or maybe the fact that she was a woman? She brushed off the negative thoughts as best as she could, pushing herself out of bed and getting dressed for another day. She was determined not to let one setback define her. Her workday was approaching, and she had responsibilities to handle. But just as she was about to grab her coat, her phone buzzed. A notification popped up, and Sofia froze when she saw it. It was from the dealership, but this time, the message was different. The subject line read, "A surprise you won't forget." Curious and slightly uneasy, she opened the email. It was an invitation for her to come back to the dealership, with an exclusive offer waiting for her. They didn't explain much in the message, just that they had something special lined up. A part of Sofia wanted to delete the email and move on with her life, but something told her this might be an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She glanced at the time, realizing she had just enough time to make a quick stop at the dealership before heading to work. As she drove to the dealership, her heart raced a little faster than usual. What could this surprise be? Had they realized they had made a mistake and wanted to apologize? Or perhaps it was a sales tactic to get her back into the showroom. Either way, she was prepared to stand firm, regardless of their motives. When Sofia arrived at the dealership, she was greeted by the same receptionist from yesterday. The woman's expression was tight, and there was no warm smile this time. "You're back," she said flatly, as if Sofia's return was more of a nuisance than a privilege. "Right this way." Sofia followed the receptionist into the showroom, but instead of leading her to a desk or an office, the woman guided her toward the center of the room, where the luxury cars were displayed. There was no sign of the arrogant salesman from the day before, but Sofia's pulse quickened nonetheless. As they walked, Sofia couldn't help but notice the puzzled glances from the staff. No one expected her to return, but now, there was an air of uncertainty in the way they looked at her. Something was different today. She was led to a sleek, glossy red Ferrari parked front and center. It was a striking contrast to the cars she had seen the day before, more expensive, more extravagant, and certainly not the kind of vehicle she would ever imagine driving. But there it was, polished to perfection. A dream car. Suddenly, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "I thought you might like this one." The voice was smooth, confident, yet unfamiliar. Sofia turned, and her eyes widened when she saw who had spoken. Standing before her was a tall, well-dressed man, his suit tailored to perfection. But it wasn't the suit that made her heart stop. It was the man himself, Jalen Richards. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the man in disbelief. He was even more striking in person than she had imagined. His calm demeanor radiated power, and there was an unmistakable aura about him, something that spoke of wealth, but more than that, of influence. "Jalen," Sofia whispered, her voice barely audible. He smiled warmly, and in an instant, all the anger and humiliation from the day before melted away. "Yes, Sofia. It's me," he said with a knowing grin. "I'm glad you decided to come back." Sofia's mind was racing. She had heard the name before, Jalen Richards, one of the wealthiest, most influential entrepreneurs in the country. But why was he here? Why was he talking to her like this? Her confusion must have been written all over her face because Jalen continued. "Let me explain," he said, stepping closer. "I watched everything that happened yesterday. I saw the way they treated you, and I didn't like it. They made assumptions about you because of how you look, Sofia. But I know better than that." Sofia blinked, still processing what he was saying. "But why didn't you say something yesterday?" He chuckled softly. "I thought it might be more of a statement if I let them carry on with their little show. Sometimes, people need a lesson in humility. And today, I'm here to give them that lesson." Sofia was speechless. She had no idea what to say. Her heart was pounding, but she couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief. Jalen turned and motioned to the Ferrari behind him. "This is your car now," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "The dealership made a mistake, and I'm here to make things right. If you're still interested in buying a car, you can have the one they tried to deny you yesterday. All the paperwork's already been taken care of." Sofia felt her stomach flip. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had never imagined anything like this happening to her. How had this man, this billionaire, known to help her? But before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. The sales manager from yesterday stepped forward, his face turning pale when he saw Jalen standing next to Sofia. Jalen's gaze locked onto the man, and with one glance, the arrogance that had been so thick the day before vanished from his face. "I trust we don't need to discuss what happened yesterday again," Jalen said calmly, his tone low but firm. The salesman nodded quickly, his voice faltering as he apologized. Sofia's shock had not worn off. But now, a new feeling surged inside her, a sense of justice, a sense of validation. Her life was about to change forever. The dealership was still in an uneasy silence as the salesman fumbled with his words, unable to make eye contact with either Sofia or Jalen. Sofia's mind was spinning, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of emotions she had felt since walking through the dealership doors. This was not how she had imagined her day going. Jalen's gaze lingered on the salesman for a moment longer before he turned back to Sofia. "You don't have to worry about this," he said, his voice gentle yet commanding. "I've already taken care of it." Sofia felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. Was this real? Was this really happening? She glanced at the Ferrari again, still struggling to grasp the magnitude of it all. How could she, a woman who had been rejected and humiliated less than 24 hours ago, now be standing in front of a multimillionaire who was giving her the very car she had been told she couldn't afford? The salesman cleared his throat, trying to regain some composure. "Ms. Richards, I sincerely apologize for what happened yesterday," he said, his voice now tinged with panic. "It was unprofessional, and I assure you it won't happen again. If you're still interested, we can finalize everything right away." Jalen raised a hand to stop him. "I don't think we need your help anymore," he said coolly. "I've already spoken to the owner of this dealership. All of this," he motioned to the showroom, "will be taken care of. You're free to go." The sales manager looked like he might faint as he nodded and quickly retreated. It was clear he understood just how out of his depth he was in the presence of Jalen Richards. Sofia, still in a daze, couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. She had always known she was capable of achieving great things, but never had she imagined a moment like this. To be given such a grand gift, especially after the pain and rejection she had experienced the day before, it was almost too much to take in. Jalen turned back to Sofia with a reassuring smile. "Let's get the paperwork sorted. You deserve this car," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "But why?" Sofia asked, finally able to find her voice. She was still trying to understand everything that was happening. "Why help me? I'm just a regular person. I don't know you." Jalen chuckled softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're not just a regular person, Sofia. You're strong, you're intelligent, and you've earned every single thing that's come your way. What happened yesterday was not just a matter of bad service. It was a lesson in prejudice. And I don't stand for that." Sofia's chest tightened as she listened to his words. She had heard a lot of empty promises in her life, but Jalen's words felt different. There was no condescension in his voice, no hidden agenda, just a simple truth. It was a feeling she had longed for but rarely encountered. "I've seen enough of the world to know that the way you were treated yesterday wasn't right," Jalen continued. "People make assumptions about others based on how they look, where they're from, or how they dress. But that doesn't determine a person's worth. I want to show you that." Sofia felt a lump form in her throat, but she held it back, unwilling to let her emotions take over in front of this stranger, this billionaire who had seen the injustice done to her and had taken it upon himself to correct it. "I don't know how to thank you," Sofia said quietly, her eyes meeting his. This is more than I could have ever imagined." Jalen smiled again, and his expression softened. "There's no need to thank me, Sofia. This is just about doing what's right. You've worked hard for what you've got, and I'm happy to be part of making this moment possible for you." Sofia swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edges of the Ferrari's door. The reality of the situation was still hard to grasp, but the weight of his words, the understanding, the support, began to settle into her heart. As they walked toward the dealership's office to finalize the paperwork, Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that her life was on the verge of a dramatic shift. But she wasn't sure whether it was the car, the man, or the affirmation that she truly mattered in the world that was making her heart beat so quickly. They entered the office, where a clerk was already preparing the documents for her signature. Jalen made small talk with the staff, making sure everything was in order, while Sofia sat quietly, trying to collect her thoughts. The clerk passed over the documents, and Sofia signed the forms without hesitation, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened in such a short period of time. As she finished signing, Jalen turned to her. "Your new car is ready. I'll have it delivered to your address later today." Sofia nodded, her throat tight again, though this time with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never expected this." Jalen gave her a knowing smile. "Expect the unexpected, Sofia. Sometimes life has a way of surprising you." With that, he turned and left the office, leaving Sofia in stunned silence. As she walked out to the dealership's parking lot, she noticed that the staff's demeanor had changed. Gone was the arrogance, the condescension. Instead, there was something akin to awe in their eyes as they watched Sofia drive away in her new Ferrari. Sofia's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel of her new Ferrari, the smooth leather cool under her fingers. The car hummed with power beneath her, and the roar of the engine seemed to echo the racing thoughts in her mind. She had gone from a woman rejected at a luxury car dealership, humiliated and dismissed, to someone who now owned a vehicle that had once felt completely out of her reach. The change was dizzying, almost surreal. She glanced at the rearview mirror, still half expecting to see the dealership in her wake. Had it all really happened? Had she really driven out of there with the car of her dreams, thanks to a stranger, a billionaire no less, who had taken it upon himself to correct the wrongs done to her? The thought of Jalen kept replaying in her mind. His calm, assured presence. The way he had stepped into the situation and turned everything around with nothing more than a few words and actions that spoke volumes. But why had he helped her? What was his motivation? As she pulled into her driveway, the world around her felt suddenly smaller. She parked the Ferrari carefully, taking a deep breath. She could hardly believe what had just happened. Her heart was pounding, her head was spinning. She didn't want to make this moment seem trivial, but there was a part of her that couldn't stop thinking about what Jalen had said. Expect the unexpected. Was she simply a charity case to him? Or did he see something in her, something more than what she had been treated like at the dealership? The front door of her house opened, and her best friend, Maria, stepped out. Maria's eyes went wide when she saw Sofia sitting in the car, her mouth falling open in shock. Is that a Ferrari? Sofia, what the hell? Maria rushed over to the car, her voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. Sofia stepped out slowly, still feeling the weight of everything that had just transpired. Yes, she said, almost in a daze. I don't really know how to explain it, but I own it now. Maria's eyes were wide with astonishment as she scanned Sofia's face for any sign that this was some kind of joke. Wait a minute, you're telling me you went from getting kicked out of the dealership to driving home in this? Sofia nodded, feeling a bit of a smile tug at her lips. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but Jalen Richards, he helped me. Maria stared at her, blinking as if she was trying to process the information. Jalen Richards? The billionaire. Sofia laughed, though it was a little strained. Yes, that's the one. He saw what happened yesterday. He knew how I was treated, and he didn't like it. So he bought me the car. Hold up. Wait, Maria said, shaking her head. You're telling me Jalen Richards personally bought you a Ferrari? You've got to be kidding me. Sofia chuckled softly, shaking her head in disbelief as well. I'm not kidding. It's real. He had it all arranged. I've signed the paperwork. The car's mine. Maria stepped back, clearly trying to wrap her mind around the turn of events. This is insane. But, Sofia, how did you even get in touch with him? What did you do to get him to notice you? Sofia thought for a moment. The truth was, she hadn't done anything extraordinary to get Jalen's attention. She hadn't asked for help or begged for a handout. She had simply walked into that dealership, determined to make a purchase, only to be rejected based on assumptions. But Jalen had seen something in her. He had chosen to stand up for what was right, not because of her wealth, but because of her character. I didn't do anything, Sofia said softly. He just saw the injustice and decided to do something about it. I don't know why he helped me. Maybe he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Maria looked at her friend, a mix of awe and curiosity in her gaze. This is incredible, Sofia. But you've got to ask, what's going to happen next? What does all of this mean? Sofia took a deep breath. She didn't know the answer to that. Part of her wanted to believe that this would be a turning point, a moment that marked the beginning of something bigger. She could see the possibilities of a life where she was no longer overlooked, no longer dismissed by those who judged her based on appearances or preconceived notions. But there was still something nagging at her, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She couldn't ignore the fact that she had been given this opportunity out of nowhere, simply because someone had decided she deserved better. It made her wonder if there was more to Jalen's motives than she understood. I don't know, Sofia said finally. But whatever happens, I'm not going to waste this. I'm going to prove to myself and to everyone else that I'm capable of so much more than they thought. Maria nodded, clearly impressed. I knew you were strong, but this is next level. I'm proud of you, girl. Sofia smiled, but it wasn't the same smile from before. This time, it was a smile of determination, of someone who had just realized the power they held, even in the face of adversity. I'll make sure they never forget what I'm capable of, Sofia said quietly. As she looked out at her new Ferrari parked in the driveway, she knew that this wasn't just about a car. It was about a new chapter in her life, one where she would no longer be underestimated, no longer be the woman dismissed and judged based on her appearance or background. She had been given a second chance, and she would take it. The next few days felt like a blur. Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that everything was moving too quickly, yet she felt a deep sense of purpose settling within her. Each time she sat in the Ferrari, the leather seats under her fingertips, the smooth hum of the engine beneath her, she was reminded that her life had changed in ways she couldn't have predicted. Word about the car quickly spread through her circle of friends, and even beyond. Maria couldn't stop talking about it, telling everyone who would listen about how Sofia had gone from being dismissed at a dealership to driving around in a Ferrari, courtesy of none other than Jalen Richards. But Sofia wasn't interested in the attention. She wasn't interested in being the center of anyone's story. What mattered to her was proving to herself that she was more than what the world saw when it first looked at her. It had been days since the incident at the dealership, and she hadn't heard from Jalen. While part of her was grateful for the space, another part wondered what it was he expected from her. He'd done something extraordinary for her, helped her in a way that no one else had, and yet he had been so calm, so detached, as if he didn't expect anything in return. Sofia knew she needed answers, and she decided that the best way to move forward was to take control of the situation. She would reach out to him, thank him properly, and see if there was something more to his gesture than just fixing a wrong. He had given her more than a car. He had given her back her dignity. She spent the next day preparing herself for the conversation. She knew it wouldn't be easy, especially if it meant revealing how much she had been affected by his actions. But she was no longer the woman who had been humiliated at the dealership. She was someone different, someone stronger. Sofia dialed his number, her heart racing as the phone rang. Hello. His voice was smooth, confident, just as it had been the first time they spoke. Jalen, Sofia began, trying to keep her voice steady. It's Sofia. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. For the car, for everything. But I need to know something. Why? Why did you help me? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Sofia felt her stomach tighten. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he didn't see her the way she thought he did. Maybe he didn't expect anything from her, but she certainly didn't want to seem like she was taking advantage. But then, Jalen spoke, his voice calm as ever. Sofia, I helped you because I could. Because it was the right thing to do. You didn't deserve to be treated the way they treated you. No one does. Sofia blinked, surprised by his simplicity. But you didn't know me anything. You don't even know me. You're right, he replied. But I saw something in you when I watched what happened at the dealership. You didn't let them get to you, and that's something I respect. People like us, we don't get to show vulnerability easily, you know? So when I saw that you were just trying to do something as simple as buying a car, and they treated you like you were nothing, I had to step in. Sofia was quiet for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She didn't know what she expected from him, but his response made her feel understood, something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. But you didn't have to do it like this, she said, her voice soft. You didn't have to buy me a Ferrari. That's not something you just give to someone out of pity. There was another pause, and this time, Jalen chuckled softly. I didn't give it to you out of pity, Sofia. I gave it to you because you're worth it. Because you've earned it in ways I can't even begin to explain. You don't need to prove anything to me, or anyone else, for that matter. But I'm not going to apologize for wanting to see you succeed. I don't think people like you get enough credit for what you're capable of. Sofia swallowed, her eyes stinging with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. To hear someone, especially someone like Jalen, acknowledge her worth. It wasn't about the Ferrari. It was about what that act symbolized, someone recognizing her value, not based on her appearance, her clothes, or her background, but because of who she was as a person. Thank you, she whispered, her voice shaky. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. You've changed my life. Jalen's voice was warm, reassuring. You don't need to repay me, Sofia. All I ask is that you keep moving forward. Keep proving people wrong, because you have the power to do that. You're capable of so much more than anyone realizes. Sofia felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she wasn't embarrassed. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was truly seen, truly valued. And it was a feeling she wasn't about to take for granted. The conversation ended with Jalen telling her to reach out whenever she needed anything. But as Sofia hung up the phone, she realized that it wasn't the material things that mattered. It wasn't the Ferrari or the money, it was the simple recognition of her worth, something she hadn't expected but now cherished more than anything. The next day, as Sofia drove the Ferrari to work, she felt lighter than she had in years. The world still had its judgments, but she was no longer going to be defined by them. She would define herself, on her own terms, just as Jalen had seen her do from the start. Sofia's life had changed in ways she could have never imagined. It wasn't just the Ferrari sitting in her driveway or the recognition from Jalen Richards. It was everything that had led up to this moment. The sting of rejection at the dealership had been a defining moment in her life, one that had fueled a fire inside of her. But Jalen had given her something more, the belief that she deserved to be treated with respect, the understanding that her worth wasn't tied to her appearance or financial status, but to the strength and character she carried within. As the days passed, Sofia became more determined to make her mark. She began to embrace the opportunities that came her way, no longer shrinking in the shadows of others' expectations. She started networking, taking on more responsibility at work, and pushing herself to take risks that she had once thought were out of her reach. And yet, as much as her professional life was flourishing, Sofia couldn't shake the thought of Jalen. His kindness had been transformative, but there was still so much she didn't understand about him, why he'd helped her in the first place, why he seemed to care so much about someone he barely knew. She knew she had to thank him properly, but more than that, she needed to find out what kind of man he was beyond the generosity and the grand gestures. After a few weeks of settling into her new rhythm, Sofia finally gathered the courage to reach out to Jalen again. This time, she wasn't calling to thank him for the car or his generosity. This time, she wanted to know the truth. She sent a simple message. "I'd like to meet you. I need to understand more about what you did for me. I think we need to talk." A few hours later, her phone buzzed with a response. "Let's meet tomorrow. Dinner at my place. I'll have everything arranged." Sofia's heart skipped a beat. Dinner at his place? She wasn't sure what to expect, but her curiosity was piqued. She agreed and set the date, her mind already racing with possibilities. The next evening, Sofia arrived at Jalen's estate, a mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lush gardens and a gated entrance. It felt like something out of a dream, but as she stepped out of her car and walked toward the front door, her nerves began to settle. This wasn't about wealth or grandeur, it was about understanding the man who had changed her life. Jalen greeted her at the door with a warm smile, wearing a casual suit that still exuded confidence. He led her into his dining room, where a beautifully set table awaited. The atmosphere was calm, intimate even, with soft lighting casting a glow on the elegant space. "I'm glad you came," Jalen said, his voice soothing. "I know you probably have a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer them." Sofia sat down at the table, the weight of her thoughts pressing against her chest. I don't understand. Why me? Why did you help me?" Jalen took a seat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "You're not the first person I've helped, Sofia, but I've seen something in you that I don't see in a lot of people. You're strong, resilient, and when they tried to tear you down, you didn't let them. You kept going, even when they assumed you were less than what you were." Sofia leaned forward, her curiosity growing. "But that doesn't explain why you went so far. Why the Ferrari? Why go out of your way like that?" Jalen took a deep breath, as if he was contemplating his words carefully. "I've built my life on making things happen, on creating opportunities for myself and others. But not everyone gets the same opportunities. I've seen too many people like you, Sofia, who are judged before they even get a chance. I wanted to show you that your worth is not determined by other people's perceptions, and I wanted to do it in a way that would leave a lasting impact. You're worth more than what they saw in you." Sofia absorbed his words, the layers of meaning unfolding in her mind. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing her that she was more than the world's assumptions about her. And in a way, Jalen had done that for her. He had shown her a glimpse of the life she could have if she believed in herself, and now she did. "You're not just giving me a car, Jalen," Sofia said, her voice steady. "You gave me a new sense of purpose. You made me see my own worth. I've been walking around trying to prove myself to others, and I never realized that the only person I needed to prove anything to was myself." Jalen's eyes softened, and he leaned back in his chair. "I'm glad you see that. Sometimes, the biggest obstacle we face is ourselves." As the evening went on, their conversation shifted to lighter topics, mutual interests, their backgrounds, and what their lives looked like outside of the wealth and business world. It was during these moments, as they laughed and exchanged stories, that Sofia realized something important. Jalen wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who saw people, who took the time to understand them and support them in a way that most people couldn't or wouldn't. His actions weren't about making himself feel good. They were about lifting others up. By the time dinner ended, Sofia felt a deep sense of peace. She had learned more than she expected, not just about Jalen, but about herself. She was no longer the woman who had been turned away at the dealership, and she wasn't the woman she had been before. She was someone new, someone who would no longer allow the world to define her. She was someone who believed in her own worth. As she left Jalen's estate that night, Sofia knew that her journey was just beginning. The Ferrari, the kindness, the opportunities, those were just symbols of something much deeper. What mattered now was the confidence she had found within herself, and the belief that anything was possible. She wasn't just a regular woman anymore. She was someone who had been given the gift of self-belief, and that, more than anything, was priceless.